There are two conflicting, contrasting theories, and the public doesn't have an answer yet.
We need to look deeper at what actually happened to John O'Keefe.
The Commonwealth's narrative surrounding the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe has crumbled. With the acquittal of Karen Reed, the focus must now shift away from a pedestrian collision and toward a truth that, in my opinion, was engineered and covered up. We are no longer debating a vehicular homicide. We are seeking the alleged truth of what possibly happened inside a home and what was done in the immediate, panicked aftermath. The digital evidence, combined with testimony and science, tells us that within minutes of arrival, John was incapacitated, and a cover-up had begun. To understand the full scope of this alleged conspiracy, we have to look past the surface, drown out all of the noise, and consider the motivation. If this theory that I am sharing with you is true, the Alberts would have the means, motive, and opportunity to commit a crime and plot a cover-up.
You need to look at the folks inside 34 Fairview. You need to look really hard at the homeowners. You need to look really hard at the occupants of the house. Something here is more than meets the eye.
After the second trial ended, I went back to the beginning. But this time I watched the first and second trials with fresh eyes, completely ignoring all of the collision BS. The defense proved that definitively, and twice at that. For a long time, the altercation theory made the most sense to me, and there is still a strong possibility that is what happened. But watching with new eyes, without the bias of a vehicle collision clouding everything, and more evidence in hand, I began cutting through the noise, combining testimonies and timing, cross-referencing statements, looking for patterns, eliminating what didn't hold, and piece by piece, names started to float away. A different picture formed for me, one that even shocked me. Studying the extremely tight timeline left me with more questions than answers if an altercation occurred. Dr. La Posada's testimony is what really drew me away from a physical altercation. I think initially seeing John's autopsy photos is what strongly led me to believe in the altercation theory, but that was before I learned about coup contre coup and ecchymosis.
Ecchymosis is a medical term for bruise. He had a bruise on his brain at the back of the brain and at the front of the brain. When you have, when the brain slaps forcefully against the base of the skull, the delicate bones above the eye break, and that's again the coup contre coup, where the brain slaps forward, and when those delicate bones are broken, there's bleeding, and that bleeding then goes right down into the upper eyelids. So it kind of looks like you have black eyes, but there's not been any punch to the face. But there's not been any punch to the face. It's only come from the skull fracture. That's sometimes called raccoon eyes, because you look like a little raccoon.
When you remove John's injuries that were associated with resuscitation, IVs, or tubes, what is basically left is the horrible exterior head injury, which resulted in internal injuries from coup contre coup and small cuts on his right eyelid and left nostril. On the right arm, a distinct pattern of parallel scratches and superficial abrasions. Dr. La Posada stated that an object did not hit John's head, which is very important to note, because many theorized he was hit in the head with possibly a weight in the basement.
When you have a blow to the head, the blow can either be the stationary head and there's a blow to it, or you can have the head that's moving and gets the blow. So looking at a pattern of coup contre coup helps the forensic pathologist differentiate that. A coup contre coup injury examines the coup, which is where the impact occurred, and then we look at what's 180 degrees opposite that impact and that's called the contra coup, or like opposite the coup. And that injury pattern helps us determine whether a person was just having a fixed head when somebody hit it, or whether the head was just standing and went down to the ground. The coup contra coup of a falling or being pushed backward has injury patterns where the impact occurred, but then there's also injury patterns 180 degrees opposite from that. And that happens because the brain is floating in cerebral spinal fluid, and when the head comes down, the brain is a little bit behind, so you get the bang on the back of the head, but then because the brain is floating, it hits the inside of the opposite side of the head. And so that makes the contra coup pattern, and that tells us that there's been a fall backwards and hitting the head.
Dr. La Posada said that John fell backwards from a medium to large force, and his head hit a surface. And she was very detailed about what type of surface. Another aspect that stood out to me differently this time around was Allie McCabe's testimony. She said something under pressure and had an emotional reaction that I don't think she realized was a confession.
Colin wasn't at the house, so he's being harassed for... He was not at the house when John was there, so I drove him home.
Colin wasn't there when John was. If you're trying to protect Colin by saying he wasn't there, you just admitted John was there. This is nothing new. Many people caught this slip-up, and the focus was on the shock of Allie admitting John was there at 34 Fairview, which caused another part of the statement to be overshadowed. In my opinion, Allie, who is very young, was under extreme pressure and reacted emotionally, and she didn't realize she just confirmed John was there in the heat of standing up for Colin. If she was being honest, she also confirmed Colin was not there. The kid with the reputation, the history, the obvious suspect. I was convinced he was involved, and he very well could be. I went back and studied his testimony and behavior again, and I started believing he really did leave at 12:10 a.m. I know, that shocked me too. Just bear with me on this. There was such an effort to keep Colin out of this. What if they tried to keep Colin out specifically because he really wasn't there when it happened, and they knew his history would position him as a prime suspect? What if all that rage we've seen from his parents? What if it's fury that their son is being accused of something he didn't do? Oh, the irony. Aaron Reed's legal team announced who they're suing in the civil case. Colin's name wasn't on that list. That stopped me cold. Why would Karen's team, who have access to so much more information we do not know, not include Colin if they believed he was involved? Maybe it a strategy? Or maybe the evidence points to others. Now, I may be giving this group of people too much credit, but it is next level for parents to pull their children into a cover-up and put them in a position to lie to law enforcement and lie on the stand. And it also adds additional risk for those that instigated the potential cover-up. Caitlin Albert strikes me as very chatty, the type who would accidentally say something incriminating without even realizing it. It would have been much smarter to send her to Tristan's for the night. Brian Jr., with his anxiety, that's a lot to place on him. Sarah Levinson and Julie Nagel? I don't think these adults would trust this young group with a secret this big if they had a choice. This would be such a huge risk. So I started narrowing the circle. I eliminated the young crew, which left me with 5 people: Brian Higgins, Brian and Nicole Albert, Matt and Jen McCabe. And I started going through each one. Could Jen hurt John? I don't think so. She seemed almost enamored with him to me. Matt McCabe? I don't think he could hurt a fly. Maybe talk a fly to death, though. If Higgins did it, none of these people would protect him. They barely know him, and he's not part of the family. Brian Albert even said Higgins was not a close friend.
Are you close friends with Brian Higgins?
I wouldn't describe it as close friends, no.
It also seems Higgins ironically ghosted the group at some point, which I find very interesting. Another moment that stood out to me was Higgins tearing up on the stand a few times. Actual emotion for John was extremely rare in those testimonies.
And I shot him a text and said, do you want me to clear the driveway for you?
So using the same plow that you were talking about before, you would offer to clear out his driveway?
Yes. And then John's nephew, and I don't know if his niece was there. She might have been in the other room. We were playing video games together.
I think the Harley gear, the big Jeep tattoos, the Jameson, the Fed credentials, I believe it's all an exterior shell. He wants to be this tough guy and alpha male, but he's not. He's just not made that way. So that left me with two people, Brian Albert and someone I had not seriously considered, Nicole Albert. Another thing that kept gnawing at me. Why is Jen McCabe fighting this hard, like someone with everything to lose? Why would she volunteer to be the so-called communications director and be so involved? What stake does she have in this that would make her risk everything? Her reputation, her freedom, her family? A sister. Jen is Nicole's sister. And you don't fight like this unless you're protecting someone extremely, extremely close. I don't see her fighting this hard for her brother-in-law, Brian Albert, but it is very possible she would fight this hard for a blood relative. And that's when I started asking the question, could Nicole somehow have more involvement? Let me walk you through this theory. In the quiet town of Canton, Massachusetts, the night of January 28th, 2022 began in celebration. But what transpired in the early morning hours of January 29th would tear a community apart, exposing a chilling web of deception, lies, and a desperate cover-up. Our investigation takes us inside 34 Fairview Road, the home of Brian and Nicole Albert, a seemingly ordinary suburban colonial home, yet its unique layout will prove crucial in the unfolding tragedy.
So I had a few friends over for my birthday.
As it is approaching midnight, Brian Jr., Julie Nagel, Sarah Levinson, and Colin Albert are all clustered in the kitchen dining room area. Laughter, music, singing, and dancing. At 11:54 p.m., Colin Albert sends a text to Allie McCabe that he is ready for her to pick him up. Midnight strikes, and Brian Jr. turns 23.
23? 23, I think? Yeah, 23.
Around 12:10 a.m., Brian, Nicole, and Caitlin Albert enter 34 Fairview. Higgins not far behind. Nicole and Caitlin enter through the front door.
I think that night, because of the weather and it was wet out, I think I went in the front door so I could walk into the foyer and take my shoes off or wipe my feet or whatever. But some of the other people still may have gone in the side door.
I went in the front door, so I would have gotten out and walked on the brick path over to the front door area, walked up the steps, and then walked through the door that enters into like a foyer area.
While the Bryans enter through the breezeway door.
I believe I went in the door on the right, which goes into the den.
So I came through what I would call like a breezeway door. So there's a front door to the residence, there's the garages, and in between there is a like a breezeway door.
At the same time, Allie arrives and texts Colin that she is there. The Alberts enter, greet everyone, and Colin heads out the breezeway door as Allie is waiting for him in the driveway. Colin does not mention Brian Higgins.
12:10. I got a text message from her that says I'm here. The side door next to the garage. As I was walking out, I saw my Uncle Brian and my Aunt Nicole. They were coming in.
Was Higgins possibly parking in the driveway across the street? Caitlin joins the party, Nicole begins to clean, and Brian Albert goes to the bathroom.
So I come in, I assume I, said happy birthday to my son, said hello to his friends, and then I just kind of went to the kitchen area, and like they had ordered food, and so I just did my usual thing. I just was picking up, wasn't a huge mess, but I was just picking up the area, cleaning, probably check the bathroom to make sure that was clean. Just my usual thing that I do, just picking up around the house. So my son Brian and his two friends, Julie and Sarah, were just kind of sitting at a kitchen table in like the dining room area of the kitchen.
Yes, after saying hi to everybody, I went to the bathroom.
Was that upstairs or downstairs?
I'm not sure. I have a bathroom downstairs and not downstairs, but on that floor and then upstairs. So I'm not sure which one I went to.
When you came
I think
back,
it was upstairs.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I think it may have been upstairs, but I'm not sure.
We find out after the fact that the Alberts owned a 70 to 90 pound German Shepherd that was inside the house that night. You owned a dog at the time, correct?
Yes.
The German Shepherd named Chloe.
Yes. Mix.
Described that dog as being not great with strangers, isn't that true?
I did describe it that way, yes. She wasn't overly affectionate with strangers. She was a heavy dog. Not everybody likes dogs. So if there's going to be people at the house that don't know the dog, they might not particularly want her around them. Never has the dog, to my knowledge, been aggressive to anybody except for the time that there was a fight between two dogs.
Chloe actually has a well-documented fight history, doesn't she?
Does she?
With dogs, a couple dogs, yes.
Ms. Albert, she also has a fight history with humans, doesn't she? Ms. Albert, Chloe has injured other humans, hasn't she?
In one incident in May of 22, when she got out and was fighting with another dog, the woman whose dog it was tried to break up the two dogs, and while she was trying to break up the two dogs, she got injured.
Testified that, quote, it started barking because it realized that people were downstairs, end quote, right?
Yes.
Chloe had a penchant for barking when she heard people, correct?
No, not necessarily.
She did that night.
Yeah, I think she wanted to use the bathroom.
Well, that's not what you said in your testimony. You said it started barking because it realized there were people downstairs, right?
Right.
So your German Shepherd, probably a decent guard dog, if she heard commotion and people, she would bark. Obviously, if Chloe hears commotion and people, she's apt to bark. That's the only question.
No.
So just that night, out of nowhere, first time ever, Chloe starts barking when people walk into the house.
No, it's not the first time ever, but she didn't bark often.
Okay, but she did bark that night, right?
Yes.
And the reason that you gave under oath for why she started barking was because there were people downstairs milling about, right?
Yes.
So in that instance, on January 29th, in the early morning hours, she was barking because she heard people.
Well, I can't say why she was barking.
Well, you did say why she was barking.
I let her out to use the bathroom, so I think that's probably why.
Except your testimony was it started barking because it realized there were people downstairs. Those are your words, Mr. Albert, not
Right.
mine.
Okay.
Do you stand by those?
Yes.
You ultimately did let Chloe out to go to the bathroom, correct?
Yes.
Then Brian Albert hears Chloe barking. He asks Brian Jr. if he took Chloe out, and Brian Jr. says he forgot. So Chloe, the Albert's German Shepherd mix, has been confined to Brian and Nicole's bedroom upstairs for at least 4 hours at this point. Brian Albert heads upstairs to get Chloe, claims to have walked her down and let her out to go do her business out of the back door in the kitchen area. Brian Albert says she's outside 2 to 3 minutes. He waits by the back door, and he monitors Chloe walking around the kitchen. However, Brian Jr. said Big Brian did not wait at the back door.
After my dad came home, it was asked if someone let the dog out. And I said, sorry, I forgot, because it was my responsibility, because I was the only one home. So he went upstairs to get the dog, got the dog, brought her downstairs, let her outside.
I went upstairs to grab the dog and let her out back to use the bathroom. So the backyard's fenced in, so I would open up the back door and she can go out, use the bathroom, and come back inside. She was out back for maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
I believe it was pretty quick. She went, did her business, and came back in.
I stayed at the doorway, and the dog went to the bathroom and then ran right back in.
Your father wasn't standing by the door, staring at Chloe the entire time that she was outside, correct?
No, I wouldn't, not the whole time, no.
I tend to believe Brian Jr. here. He has no reason to lie. Why wouldn't Brian let Chloe out, go grab a beer, possibly greet Higgins coming in, while giving Chloe more time than just 2 to 3 minutes after being cooped up for so long?
I think she might have walked around the kitchen for a minute or two, and then I think you just brought her back upstairs.
So the dog kind of walked around in the kitchen for a few minutes, and then I took her upstairs.
And then you allowed her to stay downstairs and you monitored her with the others who were in the house, isn't that right?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, you testified in that state grand jury, the same April grand jury, April of 2022. So I let it go out to the bathroom, I let it back in. I kind of monitored it a little because we usually don't have people over the house, and the dog's not great with strangers, period. So I was just making sure that the dog was all right with the people that were over, end quote, correct?
Yes.
So in fact, you did keep Chloe downstairs at least for a period of time with people that were over, right?
Yes, for a few minutes, I think. So after I brought the dog up, I just came back down and hung out with everybody else.
During this interval, John and Jen McCabe exchange texts and calls as both vehicles are making their way to 34 Fairview Road. Julie Nago texts her brother Ryan, asking for a ride home. At around 12:18 a.m., Matt and Jen McCabe arrived at 34 Fairview, and they enter through the front door. They join in at the dining room table, and Jen claims that the Bryans were in the family room at this time. Jen claims she doesn't know why, but has a faint memory of the Bryans in the family room looking at pictures. This is a very odd and detailed memory.
So I walked in through the front door. I took a right into the kitchen. And then there were people sitting around the kitchen table, Brian Albert Jr., Julie Nagel, Sarah Levinson, Caitlin Albert. My sister was over more towards like the counters and the sink. And Brian Albert and Brian Higgins were, there's like a room right off of the kitchen, like a TV room. And they were in there just talking. I think Nicole had like put up some new pictures, so, or maybe the Sun and the Marines, they might have been looking at a picture. Vaguely have a faint memory of that. I'm just trying to answer the questions and be truthful as I can.
Looking at the timeline, and if we are to believe Jen when she said the Bryans were in the family room when she arrived, that would have given Brian Albert around 9 minutes to come in, greet everyone, go to the bathroom, ask Brian Jr. about Chloe, go upstairs, get Chloe, walk her down, let her out the back door, grab a beer, and go in the family room with Higgins. What I don't think is feasible is the timeline according to Brian Albert. Getting home at 12:10, and remember, Jen places the Bryans in the family room looking at photos, and no mention of Chloe. Let's just say Brian Albert has 10 minutes from arrival to when Jen sees him. Let's deduct the 3 minutes Brian claims Chloe was outside. We are at 7 minutes. So within 7 minutes, could Brian Albert have greeted everyone, gone to the bathroom, talked to Brian Jr. about Chloe, gone upstairs to get Chloe, escort her downstairs, escort her back upstairs, and then go to the family room and be in the process of looking at photos? Oh wait, Brian Albert claims Chloe walked around in the kitchen for several minutes. So deduct several more minutes from 7 minutes, meaning he did all of what I just mentioned in around 4 minutes. Do you believe that timeline? I don't. So I think Chloe must have still been outside at this point. I don't think Brian Albert was in any hurry to take her back upstairs. I think he walked away from the back door, giving Chloe her own time to do her business and run around. Then he probably got sidetracked in the family room with Brian Higgins, who had entered the house through the breezeway door. This is where you have to pay extremely close attention and hopefully visualize how I suspect things played out. There are so many moving pieces and a very tight timeline. Based on Jen's Apple Watch, her steps match up to her arriving at 34 Fairview at 12:18 and taking 49 steps to enter the home while having a 36-second phone conversation with John O'Keefe. At 12:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text to John. You coming here?
While I was at the house, I think I shot a text just to John. Where are you? I think that's what it was.
Ryan Nagel has texted Julie that he is there. So we know everyone has been steadily drinking alcohol for hours at this point. It's loud in the house, music playing. Karen and John pull up to 34 Fairview at 12:24:38. I believe John got out at the driveway, and his phone tells us it was moving in a westerly direction toward the house at 12:25. We know John was a fast walker, plus it is freezing, so I think he got into the house quick through the breezeway door. Karen pulled up equal to the front door, so the F-150 is now at the driveway. At 12:27:33, Jen is at the front door seeing Karen's SUV and texting John.
Here, question mark, because that's when I saw the car.
While Nicole is probably cleaning in the kitchen area. Caitlin is in the kitchen area being the DJ. Brian Jr. is watching out the window. Sarah is either sitting there with her back to the family room wall, or she could possibly have been in the kitchen or bathroom. Matt is looking out the window. They see the F-150 at the driveway and Karen's SUV parked equal to the front door. Julie goes out to invite Ryan and his friends in and tell him she doesn't need a ride. Most of the attention is directed to the front of the house, outside, with everyone watching Julie at the F-150 and watching the Lexus SUV and wondering why John and Karen are not coming in. The F-150 pulls away from 34 Fairview at 12:29. At 12:30 a.m., Karen leaves 34 Fairview to make it back to One Meadows by 12:36, as we heard on the voicemail. Now that we've established all of the action outside and in the dining kitchen area, let's go through what was happening simultaneously with John and the Bryans. Let's rewind just a bit, right before Karen moves the SUV equal to the front door. During this time, I believe Brian Albert and Brian Higgins were talking in the back corner of the family room and possibly looking at the pictures on the shelves. And this is important because during the first trial, Brian Albert claims they were upstairs in his son's room looking at pictures.
No, I was there basically for the whole night, except I think at one point I may have shown Brian Higgins some photos that were in my son's room that were upstairs. So my son Jack, who's one of the twins, was in the Marines or is in the Marines, and we had put some plaques and some stuff in his room upstairs, and Brian Higgins was prior military, as am I, and I thought he would want to see the photos, so I had him look at them.
And for that period of time that you were outside of sort of the kitchen dining room area looking at the photos with Mr. Higgins, about how long a period of time are we talking?
Very, very quickly, 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes.
But in my analysis, that doesn't track. I believe the chaos of that night led to a panic-driven shift in testimony to hide his proximity.
My sister, Nicole, was in the kitchen wiping the counters because she's always cleaning. And Brian Albert and Brian Higgins were in the, I guess you'd call it the TV room area, just standing and talking. My niece, Caitlin, Sarah Levinson, Julie Nagel, and Brian Jr. were all at the kitchen table. My sister was over, I think, cleaning the counters. And Brian were off in that TV room that you can see from the kitchen because there's a wide opening. You look right to the kitchen, and then through the kitchen's the TV room, but you could look, and when you walk in, you can see because it's open. Room, kind of the kitchen opens up into the TV room, so they were in there.
So the only two that you recognized at this point in the night, not being sort of with everybody else, were Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, separated out in the family room, or whatever that room's called, living room?
Yeah, if you, like just right there, right where they are, just kind of right in the next room.
I know at one point my husband and his friend Brian were in our family room, so I kind of went in there and was talking to them. We had some shelves on the wall that just had a bunch of pictures, old pictures from our wedding or when Brian was in the Marines, so we would just kind of look at them, laugh, and talking about them.
At one point, briefly, Brian Albert showed me some photographs, family. I believe primarily it might have been of his son who had recently been in the Marine Corps.
Did you go upstairs at any time?
No. Well, I briefly went and looked at some photos.
Right. So you moved out of that area with Brian Albert alone to go to a different room?
Yes, and I think his wife Nicole might have popped in the room for a second, but it was brief.
Now, this period that you're talking about in the other room, about how long a period was that?
It was brief.
And beyond yourself and Mr. Albert, was there anyone else from the group that you described that was in the room at the same time as you and Mr. Albert?
I don't think so. I think Nicole may have popped in for a second, but I'm not 100% positive on that.
For that entirety of the time that you were there, did you go anywhere else within the home beyond what you've described as far as the kitchen and the living room?
No.
Everyone that testified about the Bryans looking at pictures placed them in the family room, all except for Brian Albert. Now, I believe the following happened in the blink of an eye. I think John O'Keefe entered through the breezeway door and into the family room with Karen's vodka soda. And the Bryans may not have even noticed his entrance. John probably slid out of his shoes upon entering. That means socks on hardwood floor. It is no secret John's blood alcohol content was extremely high, which definitely would impair balance. And in my opinion, while Brian Albert was caught up in conversation with Higgins, Chloe probably waited at the back door in the kitchen, and when not let in, she came to the glass door to be seen and let in. Brian Albert opens the door to let Chloe in, and I think several forces came to play. One, Chloe had been cooped up for hours and needed to release energy. Two, she had been out in the cold, which can be really invigorating for dogs and cause what many refer to as zoomies. 3, Chloe is not good with strangers and has a history of aggression. 4, Chloe sees John, a tall stranger in her domain. Dr. Laposada said a medium to large force caused John to fall back at an angle. I believe that force was possibly a 70-pound German Shepherd mix.
He was standing upright, and his body had momentum and went down and hit at the back of his head. So it was thrust backwards. It was a very forceful impact.
So once let in, I think she charged at John full force, attacking his right arm. I think John took a drink of the vodka soda from his right hand, so his right arm was bent and moving towards his face. This force could have caused the glass to break on John's brow bone and nose upon impact, which would explain the lacerations to John's face and why Karen found a small shard of glass in John's nose.
Was the laceration above his eyelid on the right side a separate injury altogether?
Yes, it was.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not what that eyelid laceration might be consistent with?
Some application of force which broke the skin. It was fairly small, could be some sort of object. You have to look at the whole picture to understand what happened to the body. Correct, because when an animal approaches the body, there may be damage from the claws and also from the mouth.
Were you able to determine from your review of the medical records whether the injuries that you see on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm were pre-mortem or post-mortem?
They were, yes, I can determine that. They were inflicted prior to death.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not the wounds that you see, the patterned injury that you see on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm is consistent with an animal bite or claw marks?
Yes, it is, very much.
Those wounds were inflicted as a result of a dog attack.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you speak a little louder?
They were inflicted as a result of a dog attack. Well, there are multiple groupings of wounds. These multiple groupings are patterns, and they are, in my opinion, were inflicted by the teeth and claws of a dog. I characterize them as highly specific for a dog attack.
Well, he landed on something that had a ridge on it to cause the laceration in the scalp, and then they kind of look like pencil marks. And so that means that something with granularity he hit first, then it moved up a little, broke the scalp, and then moved on a little bit above that. And with a little bit of movement, those vertical scratches were caused by some kind of like pebbly-like surface. And then it's the job of the police then to go back to the scene and look around for something which might fit that pattern. He died of brain injuries and skull fractures due to blunt force trauma of the head. An injury caused by the angular acceleration going down and hitting his head in the back.
You can't tell us objectively when his brain swell started.
It started immediately after impact. So what that tells me is that the back of his head hit something that had a fine granular pattern to it to cause those individual little marks, and then also something that had a linear or ridged pattern that he went back on that broke the scalp there. So we have two parts really to this pattern injury, that whatever he hit had some little like granularity to it, with each little sort of granule making those vertical marks, and then the ridged pattern having the major point of impact.
This brick hearth could easily be the surface that caused the fatal coup contre coup injury. This sudden, brutal interaction would have caused John O'Keefe to fall, striking his head on the unforgiving, hard brick granular edge of the hearth. A fatal impact. This sequence of events precisely explains the dog bite injuries found on John's right arm, the lacerations on John's face, and the blunt force trauma to his head, entirely consistent with a fall onto this type of surface. The fatal coup contra coup injury would have caused the ecchymosis, or raccoon eyes, as we saw in the autopsy photos. According to Dr. La Posada, the blow to the head would instantly knock John out, and he likely died within 15 minutes.
First, there would be immediate unconsciousness because of the transfer of all the energy to the brain and the massive skull fractures. So you go unconscious, brain swells, then you die.
Brian Higgins, an Army medic, would have known the severity of the injury. Brian Albert was allegedly faced with an unconscious dying man and a dog with a criminal past right on his family room floor. And they absolutely knew, if John was found inside that house with those injuries, what would happen. No one in the noisy kitchen and dining area hears it. Music blares, attention is drawn outside, loud voices singing and laughing masks the tragedy unfolding feet away. Chaos becomes cover. The clock was ticking. Jen calls John at 12:29. The log says the phone was answered and the call lasted 7 to 8 seconds. Jen deleted this call.
12:29 and 44 seconds. There's a call from you to John O'Keefe's phone lasting 7 seconds, correct?
That's what it says.
And the record indicates that it was an answered phone call, correct?
According to the record, it was answered, but I never spoke to him.
You deny speaking to John O'Keefe at 12:29 and 44 seconds.
Yes, I never spoke to him after 12:18.
Did one of the Bryans answer? And within that 7 seconds, maybe they told Jen to keep everyone in the kitchen or some type of similar message. Two intoxicated men, fearing the law, made horrific, life-changing decisions within seconds. With John O'Keefe dying near their hearth, a desperate panic seized Brian Albert had to make fast decisions. His home, his career, his entire life were on the line. He knew he had to act, and he had to act fast. The glass doors of the family room provided a direct escape route to the backyard. Brian possibly grabbed John, and in a frenzy of adrenaline and fear, dragged his body out of the house.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 paces.
At 12:31:56, John's phone records the start of 36 steps. I think Brian Albert had John's phone in his hand. At 12:32:04, John's phone is unlocked by Face ID. Could that have happened while Brian was holding the phone and dragging and the phone captured John's face? The phone is locked, and the 36 steps that covered 84 feet ends at 12:32:16, along with no more steps or movement. Now we have to remember, they did not know Karen was pissed off, left, and was not coming back. So they would have expected Karen to show up at any moment to join John, or expected her to show up possibly within an hour or so to pick him up. So they had to move extremely fast. My best guess is Brian Albert chose this destination, a temporary, highly concealed spot in the corner, formed by the back wall of the house and the fence. This was no random placement. It offered critical advantages. Plausible deniability, painting a false narrative of a drunken man wandering off, falling and hitting his head. If John was propped up in a sitting position, like we theorized in the first video of this series, this position would also make it look like he might still be alive if someone saw him. With John hidden, Brian Albert sprinted back inside, leaving Higgins to guard the family room entrance. The frantic cleanup had begun. Let's go to SIDEBAH real quick. You might be saying, if it was an accident like this, why didn't they just call 911? The Massachusetts dog attack law is extremely strict and unforgiving. Brian Albert would have known this law. If Chloe attacked John, the homeowners and dog owners, Brian Albert, along with Nicole Albert, would face devastating lawsuits, total financial ruin, and even criminal charges. And under Massachusetts liability statutes, the owner of a dog causing injury or death is often presumed responsible, even if the accident was unpredictable. Chloe had a documented past. Based on her history and her breed, I'm willing to bet homeowners insurance would not cover this tragedy. The chilling truth is Chloe was a known danger. In 2019, she had already viciously attacked another dog, so brutally that the victim's vet confirmed Chloe was trying to kill the other dog. This forced the Alberts to officially register her in Canton, a record Brian's brother, Kevin, reportedly tried to make go away. This wasn't just the dog acting out. This was a pattern of extreme aggression, a ticking time bomb that Alberts were desperate to conceal. And their desperation reached its peak when just months after John's death, Chloe struck again, attacking another dog and injuring people. As public questions about Chloe's role in John's death began to swirl, the Alberts quickly rehomed her, a term they defensively used on.
I did not get rid of my dog, I rehomed my dog.
Mr. Albert, after you learned that there were questions being raised about John's injuries and dog bites and scratches, in May of 2022, you got rid of that dog, did you not? At some point, your family got rid of Chloe.
Chloe was rehomed in May
And we can use
2023.
whatever words we want to. Rehomed, rehoused, whatever. But you got rid of her. She's no longer part of the Albert family, right?
Right.
When did you get rid of her?
So Chloe was rehomed in, I believe, May
Of 2022.
of 2022.
Just months after the incident we were discussing.
Well, after it was involved, she was involved in a dog fight with another dog out front.
Right, but that's also after the incident we
Yes.
were discussing.
Yes, May.
That's a family pet that you had had for 6 years or 7 years?
Approximately 6 or 7 years. Not
Your
sure.
explanation just now for having gotten rid of that dog is because it bit another dog and ultimately sent 2 women to the hospital, correct?
I believe 2 women went to the hospital. Yes.
But you took no action to get rid of Chloe until after you knew that serious questions were being raised about John O'Keefe's. At some point, you did realize there were questions being raised about John O'Keefe's injuries on his arm, correct?
Objection.
You allow that. Did you realize that?
I heard some talk about it, yes.
As of January of 2022, John O'Keefe had never been in your house, had he?
John O'Keefe was never in my house before or after that date.
Certainly, John O'Keefe, you would agree with me, he would count, were he in your house, he would count as a stranger to Chloe, wouldn't he? Never met her.
Hypothetically, yes.
Brian Albert himself lied to the grand jury, falsely claiming Chloe had no aggressive history. This pattern of violence, active concealment, and outright perjury provides an undeniable, chilling motive for the elaborate cover-up. A drunken accident, a dog bite, a fall, whatever it was, they knew the liability, the negligence, and everything at stake. So they panicked. Brian Higgins was not the homeowner or dog owner, so he could have walked away. His problem was impaired thinking and believing that Brian Albert was a very close friend. Brian Albert probably rationalized to a drunk Higgins that he would protect him if this happened on Higgins' property. It is possible in this scenario that Higgins felt a responsibility since he was the one urging John to come to the Alberts. Brian Albert could have guilted Higgins too, so Higgins chose to protect Brian Albert. I would be willing to bet this decision haunts Higgins every single day. With John hidden outside and the other guests oblivious, I feel like this might be the time Nicole went into the family room. They tell her and she goes into a cleaning room.
I think when I was in the other room with my husband and his friend, I had missed the conversations about Jennifer reaching out with John or her texting him and him texting her about where we lived. I didn't even realize that that was happening, that they had any intention to come. We stood in there for a little bit talking, and then eventually we just moved into the kitchen area where everybody else was.
But when you were asked where your husband and Brian Higgins were positioned at the table, you weren't able to place them there. Isn't that true?
Because I don't believe they ever sat at that table.
At least at one point, they had left the room and they were outside of your view, correct?
I'm not sure I said that.
Told the jury that you were cleaning and you weren't sure where they went, correct?
Well, initially when I first came in the house and I was doing my thing, I don't remember exactly where
And
they were.
They told the grand jury that you don't recall seeing them at the table but you don't recall where they went because you were kind of focused on cleaning, correct?
Right.
And there was one point at which you said that you joined them in family
Yes.
room, is that right? But while you were cleaning, you said, I don't really know what they were doing, but they weren't there, correct?
Yes.
So you recall your husband and Brian Higgins left your view and went to some other place in the house that evening, correct?
It could have.
So I would have had my back to that area, my back to the door that I came in.
Higgins testified he stood in the doorway of the dining area and family room with his back to the family room. This would be to block people from going into that room. Others said the Bryans were in that doorway area talking to each other. I would assume they were feeling desperate and concocting an alcohol-induced plan because they had no idea when Karen would be there. A few things to think about. Now, this is the time Higgins claims he left 34 Fairview, despite everyone else saying he left at 1:30.
I'd guesstimate it was anywhere between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, but I'm not 100% positive.
I think Brian left at around 1:30. I believe he was the first to leave.
I believe Brian Higgins left first, approximately 1:30-ish.
It was a short period of time. I knew kind of from the onset when I got in there, it probably wasn't going to be a long time because I'm not a beer drinker and that's what they had. So I was probably one of the first people to leave.
And when you exited the home, do you recall which of the two doors that you described that you would have exited from?
The same door I came in, the breezeway.
I think more than likely he was there until he arrived at Canton PD at 1:27 a.m. The footage from the Canton PD has been very puzzling. Why did Higgins go there? If this theory of what happened to Officer John O'Keefe is correct, maybe Higgins went there to purposely be seen on camera and do some type of work or administrative duties, hoping he could protect himself with qualified immunity, which is a legal doctrine that would protect Higgins from civil liability due to his job as a federal ATF agent. For this theory to be true, Julie Nagel would have to have gone out and in through the main front door. She and John probably would have crossed paths had she gone through the breezeway door.
Recall which of the two front doors you used to go outside?
I use the front door.
Front door is the one with the brick steps, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
You come down the brick steps, go down the walkway. Do you recall how you came down to where your brother was?
I walked down the steps through the little path and then down the driveway, and they were parked right in front of the driveway.
However, Matt McCabe and Nicole Albert made a point to say Julie went through the breezeway door. I think that is an odd detail to bring attention to, unless there is something more to it. And in this case, it would be critical that Julie went through the breezeway door so she would have seen John. If
you're looking at the house, your front door, windows, and then there's another door. Julie looked out or went out through that door. I either looked at that point, either looked out the window or walked over to the front door, which would be the opposite door. There's a room right next to the kitchen with a doorway that you can walk through. I was seated at the table, but you could walk through the doorway. You know, I know Julie Nagel went into that room because she was looking out the door. Other people could have walked in and out of that room. It's right there, right next to us.
I was only aware at one point I saw my son, I think, either looking out the window or at the door, and his friend Julie, she went out the side door, and I said, to Brian, is Julie leaving?
Remember Jen wanting a screenshot of Ryan's text to Julie? Based upon this theory, I think this text was very important for Jen to obtain because it gave her the exact time when John would have been inside the house and injured.
All this when you asked her for that screenshot.
I was trying to piece together
You knew all this when you asked for the screenshot. You
Yes.
knew what her position was in this case, correct?
She had no involvement. What happened outside
I didn't ask
is
you if she had
different.
involvement.
Let her finish her answer.
Go ahead.
Ms. McCabe, finish that answer.
I didn't. What happened outside was separate from anything that happened inside.
I'm going to ask you again. You knew all of that information, that Julie Nagel was a percipient witness in this case, as was everyone else inside 34 Fairview, when you asked for that screenshot, correct?
Yes.
That is another example of you coordinating information with other witnesses in this case, correct?
No, that is not correct.
Using the phone within my house, it seemed like it was it's a slang term, the dead zone for the phone. The reception wasn't great.
The phone log showed John's device went from a normal inside temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit at 12:37 a.m. to 50 degrees at 1:36 a.m. Yet the phone logged 0 steps. The thermal data shows a sustained cooling from 12:37 a.m. down to 1:36 a.m. This rate seems more consistent with a phone remaining on the body, insulated by its heat and protected by the physical shelter of the house wall and fence. Even the phone under John's shoulder, like the prosecution stated, it would still be heavily exposed to the freezing ground environment, and I would expect a much faster cooling rate. I wonder why there is no data from 1:36 to 6:06. Probably the same reason there was no ring footage from the Alberts or from the officer that lives across the street. No CCTV footage at the library the exact time Karen drove by. No ring footage from John's house when Karen pulled in. No CCTV footage of the Sallyport the exact times the taillight would have been smashed. This gap makes me wonder if the data was problematic for a certain narrative. When the official narrative relies on the complete failure of every surveillance system at the most critical moments and the convenient loss of the most incriminating digital data, the only logical question is, how many impossible coincidences must occur before we acknowledge deliberate corruption? And how stupid do they think people really are? With John O'Keefe's body still hidden on their property, Karen Reed nowhere in sight, and knowing at some point Chloe would need to be let out again, but cannot be let out with John in the backyard, a new plan needed to emerge. At 2:22:35 a.m., Brian Albert called Brian Higgins for a single telling second, possibly a ping of urgent distress. At 2:22:52 a.m., Higgins called Albert back for 22 seconds. Just minutes later, at 2:25 a.m., Jen McCabe sent 2 outgoing texts to an unknown recipient. At 2:26:37 a.m., Jen McCabe deleted 2 screenshots from her phone. And at 2:27 a.m., her highly debated Google search, "Hoes long to die in cold." A new, desperate plan emerged to move John and stage his body by the roadside, diverting blame entirely. At 2:30 a.m., Lucky and Frankentruck passed by, confirming the street was clear, a perfect, unsuspecting moment. A crucial witness, Lucky, drove by again around 3:30 a.m., this time seeing a Ford Edge parked on the street by the flagpole, but critically, not seeing John's body.
But, he went by that property and there was no body there at 2:30 in the morning. And if there was no body there at 2:30 in the morning, the case is over.
I think the Ford Edge was parked specifically to block the view from the street. It would create a visual barrier, a shield, so Brian could move John's body without being seen. Immediately after Lucky passed at 3:30 a.m., the coast would be clear, and Brian Albert could execute the final gruesome act. In my opinion, he dragged John O'Keefe's body from its concealed spot to the flagpole. This movement explains the forensic evidence, the upward angular bloodstains on John's clothes, consistent with an upright drag, and the irrefutable grass stains on the butt of John's jeans, proving contact with the ground, not just snow. Brian then swiftly pulled his Edge back into the driveway. The continued snowfall that night acted as nature's accomplice, covering any drag marks, footprints, and erasing the physical evidence of his crime. Their goal was simple: tell one little lie. John never came inside. Hope the injuries and location look like an accident. Maybe a hit and run, or maybe a snowplow hit him. Just unfortunate. Tragic. Case closed.
If I did,
I didn't ask
would
you
have
if
done
you
something
did.
to help him.
I asked you if you saw one.
No, I did not.
No one knew what happened. John never came in the house. None of us in the house had any idea what happened to John O'Keefe. So we instructed, I was saying, we don't know what happened. He never came in the house. That's what my statement was.
Sir, I didn't ask you for any of that just now, did I?
No, they never came into my home.
John never came into my house that night. He would have been welcomed, and the defendant would have been welcomed with open arms had they come in, and I wish they had. I really do.
Until the next morning, when Karen Reed, John's girlfriend, panicked and cracked her taillight backing up. At this moment, Jen McCabe saw an opportunity. The investigation shifted away from the house, away from the dog, away from the hearth. All eyes on Karen. Justice for John means demanding the full truth. It means holding everyone involved, everyone accountable for what happened that night and what they did after. This case isn't over just because one person was acquitted. If anything, it's just beginning. Keep talking about this. Don't let this story disappear, because John O'Keefe deserves more than a cover-up. He deserves the truth.
It's a possibility that this
Absolutely.
Lexus could have been shot off into space.
Highly, highly unlikely. But
Right.
again, you're asking an engineer about possibilities and probabilities.
Let's get back to reality.
Did an investigator or any forensics team ever come into your house, ever, to photograph your entire home?
No, I wish they had.
Did an investigator, yeah, me too. Physically attractive,
I thought she was an attractive woman.
romantically attractive.
I'm not going to go there. No, I don't agree with that.
Of course you're not going to go there, because that would put you in a very awkward position, wouldn't it, sir?
Objection.
What else is in the bed with you? Your keys, your wallet, any other pocket items? The real deal was what? What did you mean by I want the real deal?
Like a relationship.
What kind of relationship? A buddy-buddy relationship? You just want to go like
The same thing everybody wants, a real relationship.
a romantic relationship, Mr. Higgins?
It's possible.
Right. Did you in fact tell the truth at the prior proceeding when you said, I don't remember that phone call?
I always tell the truth.
Did you lie under oath, sir?
No, I did not.
Would you tell us if you did?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I mean, we're all guessing here, but I mean, he could have called voicemail.
We're not all guessing
Well,
here.
you are, because you don't know if he left a voicemail or didn't, or at least got voicemail and then hung up the phone.
I think one of us is trying to guess. You're as sure about that as you are about that 222 call, right?
Objection.
That is correct.
Super Bukaki? Bukaki?